Hey guys, Rob Avis here with Verge Permaculture.ca. In this video, I want to talk about some of the health benefits of gardening. Geoff Lawton has this saying that goes something like, all the world's problems can be solved in the garden. And when you really break that down, it's an incredible statement to make. And when I first heard it, I didn't really know what he was getting at. I thought the statement was kind of glib. It sounds kind of lame. Like, what do you mean? How is peak oil going to be solved by gardening? And how is climate change going to be solved by gardening? And how is nutritional deficit and lack of nutrient-dense food going to be solved by gardening? And the more I thought about it and the more I learned within the permaculture space, the more I realized that it was absolutely true. So let's just talk about a few of them and then we'll finish off with the health benefits. So most of the global calories that we consume, if it's being consumed from the industrial food system, takes 10 calories of hydrocarbon. That is incredible. That means every calorie out of that system needs 10 calories into the production of that food through the use of fossil fuels, herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, fuel to run all the machines, harvesting, transportation, food processing, packaging. I mean, it just adds up. The more you go through the system, the more you realize how insanely, I think, ineffective the system is. I think some people might call it efficient in that it is very quick to bring food from the field to the fork. But I think when we look at efficiency, we also have to add effectiveness into the equation as well. And so that system is very ineffective. And so we can always turn the problem into a solution. That's one of the primary concepts in permaculture. And so another way of saying that is that every calorie of food that we produce in our own garden, we're actually reducing or not requiring 10 calories of hydrocarbon to be exuded in order to bring food to our plate. So gardens actually solve peak oil, potentially, or at least food shortages that could be the result of energy supply shortages. Number two, we talked about climate change. And so it turns out, according to Dr. Ratan Lal from Stanford University, that agriculture over the last 12,000 years has eclipsed the amount of carbon emissions globally that all fossil fuels have emitted over that same period of time. And these carbon emissions are emissions that I hear very few people talking about. So this is in the plowing of land, which oxidizes the carbon in the soils, which releases it into the atmosphere. It's through the combustion of diesel to run these plows. There's a great article that I'll put in the show notes below called The Oil We Eat. And in this article, Richard Manning talks about how the state of Iowa uses something like 3,000 Hiroshima bombs worth of energy every year just to produce the agricultural products in that state. Insane. And we know that those tractors are not running on nuclear bombs, they're running on diesel. So there's wasps everywhere, which is actually the sign of a healthy ecosystem. So anyways, the amount of energy that's going into our systems is just absolutely insane. And as a result of that, the energy then translates into greenhouse gas emissions. So gardens can help contribute to reducing the amount of energy that we require to feed ourselves, but also when you produce a really efficient garden, a really great garden, a biodiverse garden, you're actually sequestering carbon back into that soil, so you're actually contributing to the solution. A good garden will also harvest rainwater, so we're not contributing to stormwater in our cities or in our towns. We're infiltrating water into the aquifer, so we're recharging the water lenses underneath us. So yeah, it deals with that problem. And then lastly, this video is all about health, and so let's get into some of the health benefits of having a garden. So number one, if you're growing food in soils that are super healthy, that means that they've got a good balance of microbes, and depending on what you're trying to grow, it might be a balance of microbes and fungi or just a good balance of microbes. Some plants prefer more microbial soils versus some plants which prefer more of a microbial fungal balance. And if you're planting plants in that soil, then those plants are going to be covered in those microbes. Now, most of the salad greens that you're getting from California and Mexico and generally organic farms are double and triple washed because they're being grown with human biosolids and wastewater. And so they're really scared of contaminating the food that you're going to end up eating, which means that they're not just washing off the pathogens, they're washing off any beneficial microbes as well. And what's really interesting is the Human Biome Project has determined that humans are about 99.9% non-human. I'll say that again. Humans are 99.9% non-human, which means that we're mostly microbes. We're basically a symbiotic relationship, and we just happen to have democratic consensus most of the time, meaning that we can direct kind of where our body goes. And I'm coming to the conclusion that sickness is just when our microbes start to revolt against us, and it's a good idea not to get the 99.9% angry at us. So we need to feed those, and one of the ways that we do that is through fresh organic vegetables that are picked right outside our back door. And there's a couple of main benefits to that. Number one, the microbes that are on the leaves and the vegetables are of the soil. And if the soil's healthy, it turns out that most of the microorganisms in our gut microbiome, which is in our gut, are almost identical or are identical to the soil microbes in the soil. So we're actually recharging our microbiome with microbes that are going to help us adapt to our ecosystem. Number two, the plant fibers, which are generally referred to as insoluble fiber, that are in these greens and the vegetables, they're insoluble, but they should be called microbiome food instead of insoluble fiber, because it sounds far more grandiose, and it really is that grandiose. When you're feeding your microbiome with these insoluble fibers, you're actually building the population of beneficial microbes in your gut. And there's lots of research out there that shows that this is likely the cause or helps, sorry, not the cause, but likely helps to heal leaky gut syndrome, Crohn's, MS. There's a woman, Dr. Terry Walls, who has completely reversed her multiple sclerosis as a result of eating massive amounts of organic greens. There's probably lots of reasons that this has happened. One of the main reasons likely is the amount of minerals that good fresh organic vegetables have. And so most humans, depending on again what you read and what you watch, but some of the research that I've done has shown that most humans that are living on even potentially even organic food are deficient in magnesium and potassium and all sorts of other micronutrients that you can only get by eating fresh organic vegetables. And guaranteed, anything you grow out of your own garden, first of all, isn't going to be shipped for 5,000 kilometers, and so just the shipping alone is going to be detrimental to that vegetable. But you'll be able to pick it ripe, which is really interesting. If you read some of the stuff by, I can't remember the name of the doctor, but The Plant Paradox. The doctor that wrote The Plant Paradox talks about how lectins are very prevalent in certain types of food. What happens with plants is that lectins are one of the primary defense mechanisms that they have. And so if you're picking plants that are unripe, it turns out that plants that are unripe have higher amounts of lectins than plants that are ripe. And so if you're growing food in your backyard, you're going to be able to pick the ripest fruit, or the food when it's absolutely at its prime. Lectins, as it turns out, are an anti-nutrient, and they have been directly linked to a lot of autoimmune diseases. So it kind of makes sense that as our food is grown further and further away, and it's having to travel further and further to us, that it's having to be picked less and less ripe, which means that the lectins are higher and higher and higher. And so that could be one of the contributing causes to the rise in autoimmune disease globally. In addition to that, growing it in your backyard means that you have control over all the inputs. There's an enormous amount of herbicides and pesticides, fertilizers, fungicides that are sprayed on our crops. Over the last 50 years, we've sent a strong message to farmers that we want food that is optimized for cost. And the way that we've done that is through the use of herbicides, fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides, nemicides, you name it. And so I'm not sure how we came to that conclusion that it was a good idea to be spraying the very food that we were going to consume with poisons, but we did. And so there are kind of two groups of people in the world, people that are aware of what's going on and people that are not aware of it. And so it's really important that more of us become aware of the fact that our foods are being coated with herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, etc., etc., etc. And so there's all these massive health benefits that we get as humans. One of the other really cool benefits that we've noticed being parents is that when our kids grow the food, they end up eating the food. So there's something very visceral and tangible about actually putting a seed in the ground, raising a plant, going and harvesting it, and then consuming it. And so if your kids are not ones to necessarily eat vegetables, growing a garden might be a great way to get them engaged in the consumption of vegetables, which are so important to their health and development. So thanks so much, guys. I look forward to hearing your comments on this. How have you brought gardens into your kids' life? And what have been some of your insights? I'd really like to know that. If you found this video useful, please hit like. It always helps when you hit share if you share this with other people or on social media. And hit subscribe if you want to get notified when we do other videos like this. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.